Hello, welcome. The book I will summarize for you today is Nickel and Dimed Undercover in Low-Wage USA. This book is a work of non-fiction, and the I in the title refers to the author Barbara Ehrenreich. As an educated column writer, how could Barbara live in poverty? This has to start with the origin of this book. One day, Barbara and an editor from the magazine Harper were chatting and discussing a topic of interest to both parties. How do those without professional skills survive with a meager salary? By meager salary, it means earning between $6 to $7 per hour, equivalent to about 45 RMB, working 8 hours a day for 360 RMB. However, this conversion is not significant as you cannot spend dollars with RMB's purchasing power. As we will see later, Barbara proves with her actions that this amount of money is difficult to sustain a living. When Barbara was chatting with the editor, she said off the cuff that someone should do an investigation and live in the real bottom. The editor said the idea was good and asked Barbara to do it. So, Barbara turned from a column writer with a middle-class standard of living into a restaurant server, a janitorial company employee, and a Walmart salesperson. She wrote this experience into this book. Of course, Barbara was willing to do this not just for interest. When she conducted this investigation, she was a 50-something white woman, and at the time the Clinton government was reforming the welfare system and about 4 million women were entering the labor market in the United States. Barbara came from the bottom herself, with a father who was a miner and an ex-husband who was a truck driver. She knew that the bottom people, especially bottom women, needed to speak out, and so she immersed herself in the lives of the impoverished. Of course, this immersion was a show. She found a job and housing herself, striving for a balance of income and expenses every month. But she did not really become a poor person. She knew she was just visiting the world of the low-income workers, and she could leave anytime she wanted with her actual assets, savings in the bank, health insurance, and property. Note these three assets: savings, insurance, and property. She was just experiencing what life is like for low-wage workers, and she could leave when she couldn't take it anymore. However, some writers have actually lived in poverty and have struggled to make ends meet, such as the British writer Orwell, the one who wrote 1984 and Animal Farm. He wrote a book called Down and Out in Paris and London, which is a true account of his experience working as a small worker in a Paris restaurant. How did Orwell describe poverty? Let me read you a passage from Down and Out in Paris and London. At that time, he had no job and only 47 francs in his pocket. He said, "The feeling of poverty is strange when you first experience it. Before that, you have always been imagining what poverty is like, and you have been afraid of poverty all your life. You think poverty is a simple thing, but the reality of poverty is very complicated. You think poverty will be painful, but poverty is just dirty and boring. The first thing you experience is the feeling of being a low and inferior person. It changes your way of life, you become very thrifty, and you don't even let go of breadcrumbs." Whether it is true poverty or fake poverty, Orwell and Barbara mentioned that we have always been afraid of poverty. Barbara's book is about her experience as an undercover to feel the poverty and hardship, and the readers also follow her to experience this feeling. Barbara changed from a writer to a working woman, and her first task was to find a place to live. If there is no place to live, it is not the poor, it is the homeless. Like the middle class, the biggest expense of the poor is housing. Even if you rent a room in a motels or live in a trailer, housing expenses account for about 40% of income. Barbara's work trajectory was as a restaurant server in Florida, a maid in Maine, and a sales clerk at Walmart in Minnesota. Our interpretation is divided into two parts. The first part follows Barbara's footsteps and sees how she completed the work of a restaurant server, maid, and sales clerk. The second part looks at what conclusions she drew from this experience. Let's first enter the first part. Barbara started a hard life in Sestakey, Florida. She had to find a place to live first. A house 15 minutes away from the city was rented for $675, which exceeded her budget. The housing prices here are expensive, just like in big cities such as Boston or San Francisco, where the rich and the poor compete for living space. Poor Barbara had to rent a house 48 kilometers away from the city, with a rent of $500, clean floors and a solid mattress. She drives to work, with a commuting time of 45 minutes. Next, it's finding a job. There are many job advertisements, but job advertisements do not reflect the real job shortage situation. Employers keep advertising because the low-wage labor market is highly mobile, and employers want to have enough backup candidates. Barbara's first job was as a waitress at a restaurant called The Rim. She worked from 2 p.m. to 10 p.m., with an hourly wage of $2.43. U.S. labor laws stipulate that for service personnel who can receive tips, employers can only pay a basic minimum wage of $2.13 per hour. Most of the diners here are blue-collar workers. Waitresses want to earn more tips, so they try to make sure that customers have a good dining experience after a long day of hard work. Waitresses use methods such as giving more butter or salad dressing, give customers more calories, and they may give a little more tip, which may be why Americans are prone to being overweight. Barbara worked for about 10 days and felt pretty good. She had a little understanding of her colleagues' conditions. For example, a waitress named Gail was not satisfied with the room she rented and was going to move to a motel first. The daily rent was $40. Barbara found it strange, why not rent an apartment with a daily rent of $40? Gail replied that she couldn't afford the first month's rent and deposit. Barbara started a poor life with $1,300 in startup funds. She rented a house for $500 a month, plus a deposit, for a total of $1,000. Then she used $100 to buy daily groceries and kept $200 as a reserve. This starting point is different. Barbara has $1,000 to rent a house and then works every day, including tips, earning a little more than $5 an hour. With such a low hourly wage, it's hard for her to save money to pay for rent and a deposit, even if it's 1 month rent, 1 month deposit instead of 3 months. Poor people don't have any magic financial methods, but often have to face additional expenses. In the West, Barbara earned $1,039 in a month, $517 of which was spent on food, gasoline, toiletries, laundry and phone. The rent was $500, leaving a balance of $22. But what about seeing the dentist and paying for medication? $22 is not enough. Barbara paid $1,100 first when she started living in poverty, so she worked for a month and did not achieve a balance between income and expenditure. She had to consider working 2 jobs. To work 2 jobs, she has to be close to the city, so she moved out of the room with a floor, rented a trailer and lived in a trailer park, with her living costs rising to $625. She worked at another chain restaurant from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. and then rushed to the Stove-Side restaurant to serve dishes, clean, etc. She had to take painkillers after a few days of work because she was too tired to work without them. Soon, Barbara collapsed. When Barbara reviewed her experience working in the restaurant, she wrote about the poor sanitation in the kitchen and the confrontation between the staff and the manager. She said that in the restaurant, the chef wanted to make delicious food and the waiter wanted to treat guests politely, which is human nature. But the manager stood on the opposite side of human nature. The manager's only goal in the restaurant was to ensure that the company made money. In low-wage workplaces, the manager is the enemy of the working class. Low-wage workers must always be under the supervision of the manager and cannot slack off. But slacking off is also a human nature. So, many restaurant servers smoke. Only when they go out to smoke are they in a state of freedom without supervision. Next, Barbara went to Maine. She found that the rent for apartments here was over $1,000, and poor people lived in motels. Barbara first stayed in a motel for $59 a day, and then found another motel for $120 a week, with a living room, separate kitchen, and bed. In 3 days, Barbara found 2 jobs. One company hired her as a maid, with a wage of $6.65 an hour. In addition, she had to work at an elderly care center on weekends, earning $7 an hour, to care for patients with Alzheimer's. The so-called maid company, in familiar words, is a domestic service company or a cleaning company. The main job of the maid is to clean for others. Barbara was hired by a chain company. The maid had to wear a uniform, green pants with a bright yellow polo shirt, and comply with etiquette regulations, such as not smoking in any place, not eating or drinking in the house, not chewing gum, and not speaking dirty words in the house. Every time a job is received, the company sends 3 to 4 maids to clean. The maids carry plastic buckets with cloths and various cleaning agents and sit in the company's car to the destination. The company's fee is $25 an hour for each person sent, but the maid only earns $6.65 an hour for working. On Barbara's first day, she has to undergo business training and watch videos on how to clean dust, clean the bathroom, and kitchen. Barbara says that there is a kind of aesthetic beauty in cleaning, and the manager of the maid company also says that cleaning is a woman's nature. In fact, this cleaning training is interesting and quite informative. For example, when you enter a room to start cleaning, you need to mentally divide the room into several units, starting with the unit on your left, and cleaning each unit in the order from left to right and from top to bottom. When starting to clean, you need to prepare 4 cloths. 1 white cloth sprayed with a cleaning solution and placed in the pocket on the left side of the apron. 1 white cloth sprayed with a disinfectant and placed in the middle pocket. A yellow cloth sprayed with a wood board shine and placed in the right pocket. There is also a dry cloth for polishing that should be placed in a pants pocket. The maid company's business training includes using a vacuum cleaner, removing dirt and stains from the bathroom, scrubbing toilets, and so on, paying close attention to details, such as using baby oil to clean the stainless steel sink, placing the labels of bottles and cans of condiments and shampoo facing out, using toothpicks to comb the fringes of the Persian rug, folding the ends of toilet paper and kitchen paper neatly, and so on. It is difficult for us to experience how tiring Barbara's work in the restaurant is, but you can experience the intensity of the work of a cleaner by cleaning your own home according to these requirements. And pay attention to the speed of the work, not to do housework slowly, but to clean effectively. During the time as a maid, Barbara goes to the company every day at 7:30 a.m. and can leave at 3:30 p.m., as per the regulations, but in fact, she leaves the company around 5 p.m. She says that she is not tired because she has a high-protein diet for decades, has good medical conditions, has fitness habits, and also does housework herself. She does not want to hire someone to clean, and strongly resists this relationship with others, because it is not a simple employment relationship. In the book, she discusses whether it is necessary to clean the floor on all fours. One maid company advertises in this way: we clean the floor in the old-fashioned way, using both hands and knees. Barbara thinks that crawling on the ground to clean the floor for someone else, to clean toilets and bathtubs, which are very intimate places, is in a state of contempt or hostility. The maid company's part-time workers can feel the host's hostility towards them. When they wear the maid's uniform and enter the supermarket or bar, they can also feel the discrimination from others. Barbara says that her work clothes may be the cause of discrimination, and after a day of work, her body has a smell of toilet and sweat mixed together. In regards to odors, Orwell also has a lot of experience, as he devoted a significant portion of his book to analyzing discrimination against the working class. He says that the true secret of class distinction in Western countries is based on odor, and that no emotional preference or hatred can be as profound as sensory stimulation. Differences in character, education, intelligence, and moral principles can all be overcome, but physiological disgust cannot. Orwell says that this situation was because at the time the working class did not have good hygiene conditions, and they could not afford to bathe every day or change their clothes in a timely manner. Nowadays, the working class has improved hygiene conditions. However, those who work in dirty jobs are still discriminated against. For example, a cashier in a supermarket would look down on a maid who cleans toilets. Barbara mentions in her description of the maid's work that the houses she cleans are mostly spacious and bright, and the owners show off their taste in home decoration, while the dirty work is done by the maid. Barbara made some sarcastic remarks about the rich people's decoration taste. The maids at the cleaning company have a low cultural level and low income. Some of them cannot afford a full lunch, and they have to rely on painkillers to cope with their work. When the maids are sick, their manager, a Mr. Ted, always tells them to work through it. What surprises Barbara is that the maids hope to be recognized by Manager Ted, and if Mr. Ted shows them a little kindness, they will be grateful. For this phenomenon, Barbara's answer is that the emotional needs of the maids have been ignored for a long time. A maid cleaning a house does not receive gratitude from the owner. They engage in a work of exile, and they are ignored and hated outside of mainstream society. Such jobs include maids, doormen, caretakers, etc. Low-wage workers gradually feel like they are of lower status, and Manager Ted is a living representative of a better world that the maids can see. In that world, everyone can go to college, wear decent clothes to work, and go shopping on weekends. Barbara's time as a maid was the closest she came to a state of balance between income and expenses. This was because she worked 2 jobs. In addition to being a maid, She also worked as a caretaker at a nursing home for elderly patients with Alzheimer's on weekends. Her after-tax income was $300 a week, 40% of which went to rent, which was the off-season rent in the area. In the summer, the rent would go up, and Barbara had to save enough money and pray that she wouldn't get sick to deal with the increased rent. Barbara couldn't be sure how long she could work 7 days a week without a break. When she left the maid company, she revealed her identity to her colleagues. She asked her colleagues, "When you clean someone's house every day and they have so much property while you have nothing, how do you feel about it?" There is a maid named Lolita who has a spinal disc pain and owes $8,000. She says, "I hope one day I can have those things. That's my motivation. My goal is to climb to the same position as them." Another maid named Colleen is a single mother with 2 children. Her answer is more practical. "I don't want those things they have. I just hope to take a day off occasionally and have some money to buy daily necessities." After leaving the maid agency, Barbara came to work as a salesperson at Walmart in Minnesota. During Walmart's onboarding training, Barbara found that the employees here are not called employees. There is a new term called work partner, and their superiors are called service leaders. Barbara says that Walmart's new employee training is impressive, and the leaders emphasize that Walmart's 3 main principles are respect for individuals, exceeding customer expectations, and pursuing excellence. The training emphasized that Walmart is like a big family, and the subtext Barbara read is that Walmart doesn't need a union, as unions have declined in the US and Walmart has thrived. In Barbara's view, Walmart's new employee training is a brainwashing course that makes you believe that the working atmosphere at Walmart is friendly and respectful of individuals. Barbara works in the women's clothing department at Walmart, with the task of keeping the women's clothing in a available for purchase state, which means organizing the clothing. The women's clothing department has a lot of returns, most of which are clothes that customers tried on and didn't fit, or clothes that customers bought and then returned, as well as clothes that were disarranged while browsing the shelves. Walmart sells clothes that the working class wears, with the most expensive women's clothing priced at $29.90. Customers use the big shopping carts in the supermarket to load the clothes, try them on in the fitting room, and 90% of the clothes won't be taken. Then pile them back into the shopping cart and put them back on the shelf. Barbara initially took 45 minutes to clear a shopping cart, and after a little bit of skill, it took her half an hour to clear a shopping cart. One of the benefits of this job is that you don't have to talk to people, you just have to organize the clothes. Barbara's first week of work was over and she received recognition from her leader, but starting the second week, her resentment rose. Her schedule was originally from 10 in the morning to 6 in the evening, but it was adjusted to 2 in the afternoon to 11 in the evening the second week. The working hours changed from 8 hours to 9 hours, including a 1-hour dinner break and 2 15-minute breaks. But the evening was the peak of Walmart's customer flow, with customers flooding in with babies and children, and the shelves were very messy. Barbara complains that it is because of the carelessness and laziness of the customers that she has to constantly bend down to pick things up and organize the shelves as if the customers had never come. In other words, she and the customers have become a hostile relationship. Barbara mocks the obese working-class civilians in her mind, saying they have eaten too many chips, with huge chunks of meat popping out of their necks or behind their knees. Because of some petty things, she also started quarreling with her colleagues, and at this point, she suddenly realized that if her father had not worked hard to change his identity as a minor and give her a better education, she might have really become a salesperson at Walmart, becoming harsh, cunning, and full of resentment. In the employee break area at Walmart, Barbara saw a poster that read, "Your mother doesn't work here, so pick up after yourself." She thought that those who carelessly threw clothes around in the supermarket were probably mothers themselves, and their job at home was to tidy up toys, clothes, and other miscellaneous items. They come to shop, and the best experience is to mess up the merchandise and let others clean it up. Barbara's job is to create an orderly shelf, triggering their desire to destroy and giving them a better shopping experience. Barbara's biggest feeling working at Walmart is meaningless, or boredom. When she was a restaurant waitress, she could study the various customers. When she was a maid, she could look at all kinds of houses. But organizing shelves in a supermarket is the same every minute, every day. She felt that she had aged several years in Walmart. She said that when you start selling your time by the hour, you may not realize that what you are really selling is your life. Is Barbara too sentimental? When she was a waitress, She complained that the restaurant manager had to monitor their behavior. When she was a maid, she felt that she had lost dignity. And in Walmart supermarket, she felt bored. Is it common for low-wage workers to lose self-esteem and feel meaningless in their work? Let's look at the second part and see what conclusions Barbara has drawn from her low-wage life. The book Nickel and Dimed Undercover in Low-Wage USA has 4 chapters. The first 3 chapters are about her experiences as a waitress, maid, and waiter. The 4th chapter is called Evaluation of Results and provides a brief summary of her investigation. Her first conclusion is that a healthy single person cannot support themselves with hard work alone because the salary is too low and the rent is too high. Rich people and poor people compete for housing in the open market, and the poor have no chance. Rich people will always buy the place where the poor live with a high price, build a big building or a golf course, and the poor must live in a more expensive, more desolate, and further away place from the workplace. Society's indifference to the housing crisis of low-income individuals and the government's standard for poverty is still based on the proportion of food expenses to household income, while food inflation is relatively slow and rents are always rising. Her second conclusion is that low-wage work restricts a person's mobility and deprives a person of basic citizenship rights and dignity. When she was a waitress, the manager could check her purse to see if she stole the salt shaker. The manager would prohibit employees from talking, gossiping, and a large number of work standards would remind you of how low your position is in the social hierarchy. Low-wage laborers endure many humiliations, such as drug testing and personality testing when they are hired, constantly being monitored and criticized, and if you feel that you have no value, you may feel that you deserve such a salary. Her third conclusion is that poverty is invisible, and people adopt a conspiratorial science attitude towards poverty and the poor. One night, when Barbara was working, she watched TV and suddenly realized that the world we see on TV is a world where everyone can earn more than $15 an hour, with stories of fashion designers, teachers, and lawyers, and the poor have disappeared from political vocabulary and daily entertainment. After she ended her low-wage life and returned to the middle class, the rabbit hole leading to the bottom life closed. People who are not poor themselves have a hard time understanding the extreme pain of poverty. A hot dog is a lunch, a trailer is a home, and once sick or injured, you have to grit your teeth and get through it with work. These are all very tragic experiences, and rich people or the middle class are increasingly unwilling to share space and services with the poor. They send their children to private schools, move to the same class of residences, do not take public transportation, and wealthy young people do not work during the summer to experience the lives of the poor. They are not willing to do things that make them sweat, have low salaries and do not benefit their brains. Rich people and the upper middle class always treat the poor with impatience. They rely on the labor of low-wage workers to live, but do not feel ashamed. The above 3 points, rather than being conclusions drawn by Barbara, are her observations. Conclusions in economics or sociology would definitely require statistical numbers and more rigorous arguments. Barbara's conclusion, although using some statistics, is more of a summary based on intuition and compassion. Let's briefly review the key points of this video. Barbara experienced life at the bottom and worked as a waiter in a restaurant, maid in a cleaning company, salesperson at Walmart, and sometimes had 2 jobs. She wanted to try to survive on a very low salary. The conclusion was that she couldn't balance her income and expenses. She could barely make it, but couldn't get sick or have any extra expenses. In her experience, spending $30 on a pair of pants was a huge expense. Barbara wrote about this experience in My Life at the Bottom and emphasized that low-wage work not only leads to poverty in terms of material, but also creates spiritual poverty, leading to a vicious cycle of the poorer you are, the more you work. And the more you work, the poorer you get. Rich and poor people compete for living space. Rich people buy up the places where the poor live at high prices, and they raise rents. Rich people in the middle class adopt a conspiratorial sinus towards poverty. Rich people and the upper middle class are impatient with the poor, and they do not feel ashamed of poverty. How to solve poverty? There is a number that says in the United States, a family of an adult and 2 children needs an income of at least $30,000 per year to survive, equivalent to $14 per hour. Barbara believes $30,000 is not enough, and of course, this type of family is relatively extreme, but if both adults and the family work, the situation will be better. It is impossible for private enterprises to rely on salaries to allow each employee to live a decent life. Civilized countries should compensate for the shortcomings of wages with public services such as health insurance, housing allowances, and daycare centers. But the United States allows its citizens to fend for themselves. In fact, the term fend for themselves is harsh, and in this book, Barbara recounts her experience seeking social assistance, and when she faced hunger and cold, she still received $7 worth of food vouchers from a social welfare center. The real bottom is not there. From Orwell to Barbara in the 80s and 90s, some parts of the world tried to solve poverty with extreme methods, promising everyone a happy future, but the outcome was very sad. Here we may need to revisit a phrase from British philosopher Isaiah Berlin. Human ultimate goals sometimes conflict with each other, unavoidable choices that are painful and uneasy compromises. However, some needs are common. If we can ensure food and clothing for those who are hungry and cold, expand personal freedom, resist injustice, and create a minimum condition for a dignified society, and if we have a little tolerance and establish a little rule of law and social equality, this would be a very, very great progress.